Okay, so are you ready to dive into this? I'm kind of excited about this one. We're tackling Dr. Becky Kennedy's Good Inside. And I gotta say, just flipping through it, it's got me thinking differently already. Like, what if we've been approaching this whole parenting thing from the wrong angle? You know what I
Right.
mean?
Like completely turned around. This idea of hers that we should be focusing on the why behind our kids' behaviors instead of just trying to fix them. It's kind of blowing my mind a little.
Totally. So, like, instead of seeing a kid throwing a tantrum in the grocery store and thinking, oh, great, here we go again, we should be asking ourselves, what's going on in their little world that's making them act this way?
Exactly. Dr. Kennedy actually uses this phrase. She calls behavior a clue to the bigger story. It's like that tantrum. It's not the whole story. It's just a tiny piece of what's going on in their heads and their hearts.
I love that. So, how do we become these, like, emotional detectives? How do we figure out what our kids are trying to tell us, especially when, sometimes it feels like they're speaking a completely different language?
Well, Dr. Kennedy talks about this idea that two things can be true. Like your child can be totally exhausted and need sleep, but they also desperately want to stay up late and watch another movie.
Right.
Both of those things can be true at the same time, and acknowledging both is key.
So instead of getting into a power struggle over bedtime, it's more about saying, hey, I hear you. You're not ready for bed, but it's really important for your body to get rest. And we're going to stick to our bedtime routine.
Exactly. You're validating their feelings while holding that boundary. And that can be really powerful for kids, especially for those who are what Dr. Kennedy calls deeply feeling kids, or DFKs.
Well,
Yeah, these are the kids who experience emotions on a whole other level. They feel everything so intensely. And traditional discipline strategies like timeouts or even just directly naming the feeling, they can actually backfire with DFKs. It can
right.
feel too overwhelming, too intense.
So what do we do? How do we parent these deeply feeling kids in a way that supports them, that helps them navigate those big feelings without, completely losing our minds in the process?
Well, one of the most important things is something called containment. And it's not about physically restraining your child. It's more about creating a safe emotional space for them to work through those big feelings.
Okay, so it's like we're creating a container for those big emotions, helping them to not feel so scary and overwhelming.
Precisely. Imagine your child is having a meltdown because you cut their sandwich into triangles instead of squares, right? Instead of engaging in the argument, you calmly say, I can see that you're really upset about this. It's okay to be upset, but we don't yell in our house. Let's go to your room and take some deep breaths together. You're offering them your presence, your calmness, while also setting that boundary.
Okay, so we're riding the wave of their emotions with them, not trying to stop the wave from crashing. It's like, I see you, I hear you, and I'm here for you, even when you're feeling all the feels.
Exactly. And as they experience that co-regulation, they start developing their own internal resources to handle those emotions. They learn to self-soothe, to find their own calm by observing how we help them through it. It's like we're giving them the blueprint for emotional regulation.
Okay, this is all making so much sense. We've talked about behavior as a window into their inner world, this two things can be true concept, and now containment, especially for our deeply feeling kids. What else does Dr. Kennedy suggest as we navigate these often choppy waters of parenting?
Well, she reminds us that even with the best intentions, we're going to mess up sometimes. We're going to yell when we said we wouldn't. We're going to say things we don't mean. We're human, and parenting is hard.
Oh, tell me about it. There are days when I feel like I'm failing miserably, like I should just hand out participation trophies to both myself and my kid for surviving the day.
Right. We've all been there. But here's the thing. Dr. Kennedy says it's not about being perfect. It's about repairing those ruptures in the relationship when we mess up.
Oh man, the dreaded mom guilt. It's real. Okay, so how do we actually repair things with our kids when we've messed up? Is a simple, I'm sorry enough?
It's a good start, but Dr. Kennedy has this framework that's even more powerful. She says, first, reflect on what happened. What was your role in it? How did your actions contribute to the situation? Then, acknowledge the impact your actions had on your child.
So instead of saying, Mommy had a really bad day, so I lost my temper, it's more like, Mommy yelled at you, and that probably made you feel scared and sad. I'm really sorry for
Yeah,
yelling.
you got it. It's about owning our part in the situation and showing empathy for how our actions affected our child. And then, a simple, heartfelt, I'll try my best to do better next time can be incredibly powerful.
I love that. So it's about modeling those behaviors we want to see in them, taking responsibility, making amends, showing them that relationships can withstand conflict. It's kind of beautiful when you think about it that way.
It really is. And speaking of relationships, Dr. Kennedy also has some fascinating insights into sibling rivalry, which, let's be honest, can be one of the most challenging parts of parenting.
Oh, don't even get me started. My kids can go from playing nicely 1 minute to a full-blown WWE smackdown over a Lego the next. It's like they forget they're related sometimes.
Right. But here's where it gets interesting. Dr. Kennedy actually views sibling rivalry as a normal, healthy part of development.
Wait, so those constant squabbles, the hair pulling, the never-ending battles over who gets to use the blue cup, that's all. Good. I'm not sure I'm following this one.
Okay, hear me out. Imagine this for a second. Your partner comes home one day and announces they're taking on a second spouse.
Whoa, okay. That escalated quickly.
Right. Think about the emotional roller coaster you'd be on. Jealousy, insecurity, maybe even a little resentment like, hey, what about me? Am I not good enough?
And suddenly, those arguments over who gets the last cookie seem a little less dramatic.
Exactly. And that's basically what our kids are experiencing when a new sibling enters the picture. It's like
Yeah.
this new person just waltzes in and starts getting all this attention and love and praise.
So it's totally natural for them to feel a little threatened, a little jealous, like, hey, that used to be my spot on the couch.
Precisely. And Dr. Kennedy emphasizes that instead of shutting down those feelings or telling her kids to just be nice, it's so important to acknowledge and validate their feelings.
So it's less about stop being mean to your brother and more about it sounds like you're feeling a little jealous of the attention your brother is getting. That's understandable. It's hard to share mommy sometimes.
Exactly. It's about giving them the language to understand and process their emotions, which ultimately helps them to manage those emotions in healthier ways.
Okay, so we're validating those jealous feelings, but then what? Do we just let them duke it out over every toy and every crumb on the floor?
Not exactly. Dr. Kennedy encourages parents to help their kids find solutions together, but not in the heat of the moment. She gives this example. Two kids are fighting over a toy. Instead of immediately jumping in and playing referee, the parent says, wow, two kids, one toy. That's a tough one. I wonder what we can do here.
Yeah.
They're not offering solutions. They're encouraging their kids to come up with solutions on their own.
Ah, so instead of always being the problem solver, we're becoming the problem-solving facilitators.
Exactly. It's about teaching them to think critically, to be creative, and to find win-win solutions. And by handing them the reins, you're building their confidence and resilience.
This is all starting to make so much sense. We're starting to see all these behaviors, the tantrums, the sibling squabbles through a whole new lens. But what about those specific challenges that every parent faces at some point? Like, what about when your kid just point blank refuses to listen to you? You're telling them to put their shoes on for the 10th time, and it's like they've suddenly gone deaf.
The classic selective hearing that all kids seem to master. Dr. Kennedy has a lot to say about this one. And again, she urges us to look beyond the surface.
Okay, I'm all ears. Tell me, what's the deeper story here? What's driving that refusal to cooperate, that sudden onset of deafness?
Well, often it boils down to a need for autonomy. Just like adults, kids crave a sense of control over their lives. They want to feel like their opinions and choices matter.
I can relate to that. Nobody likes to feel like they're being bossed around all the time. And let's be honest, kids get a lot of instructions throughout the day. Don't touch that. Eat your vegetables. Get ready for bed.
Exactly. And for kids, especially those who are naturally more independent, that need for autonomy can manifest as stubborn refusal, even if it's something as simple as putting on their shoes or tidying up their toys.
It's like a power struggle in miniature. Okay, so how do we deal with it? Do we just give in to their every whim to avoid a meltdown? Does this mean total anarchy in the playroom?
Definitely not. It's about striking that delicate balance between setting boundaries and respecting their need for independence. It's not always easy, but Dr. Kennedy offers some practical strategies. One she calls, connect before you ask.
Connect before you ask. Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It's simple, but powerful. It's about taking a few minutes, even just 5 minutes, to connect with your child before you make a request. Get down on their level, engage in what they're doing, give them your full attention.
So fill up their love tank before hitting them with the chore list or the get ready for school routine.
Exactly. It's like you're saying, I see you, I value you, and I want to spend time with you. Oh, and by the way, can you please put your shoes on now? We need to leave in 5 minutes.
It just feels so much better than barking orders from across the room. Okay, connect before you ask is going straight into my parenting toolkit. What else can we do to navigate those not listening moments?
Another strategy Dr. Kennedy recommends is role playing.
Role playing, like pretending to be a kid who's not listening. I'm not sure I'm ready for an Oscar just yet.
It's actually a lot simpler than it sounds.
Yeah.
It can be as easy as letting your child give you instructions and then following them, no matter how silly.
Ah, so they get to be the boss for a little while. I bet they'd love that.
Exactly.
Mm.
It's a playful way to diffuse tension, build connection, and even sneak in a little lesson about following directions.
Okay, I can see how that would work. It's lighthearted, it's engaging, and it helps them to feel heard and understood. Brilliant. All right, we're tackling not listening moments with connection and role playing. But what about those times when a child is just flat out rude? And I'm not just talking about a little bit of back talk. I'm talking full on, I hate you, you're the worst mom ever kind of stuff.
Ouch. Yeah, those are tough ones.
Yeah.
But guess what? Dr. Kennedy would probably say that even those hurtful words are a clue to a deeper story.
So what's the deeper story there? What's going on beneath those harsh words that make us want to, like, launch into a lecture about respect?
Often it's a sign that they're emotionally dysregulated, they're overwhelmed, they're frustrated, maybe they're even scared or sad, and they haven't yet developed the skills to express those emotions in a more acceptable way.
So it's not necessarily about being intentionally disrespectful. It's just their big feelings bubbling over in that moment.
Precisely. And Dr. Kennedy would say that instead of taking the bait and getting into a power struggle, or worse, meeting their rudeness with our own rudeness, we need to respond with empathy and understanding.
Okay, so instead of snapping back with a, don't you dare talk to me like that, it's more like, wow, you sound really frustrated right now. Tell me what's going on.
Exactly. You're acknowledging their feelings, creating a space for them to calm down before you address the behavior itself.
So responding with empathy, creating that space for them to regulate. What else can we do when those rude remarks start flying?
Dr. Kennedy has this brilliant phrase, don't take the bait.
Don't take the bait. Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me more.
Think of it this way. Those hurtful words, as much as they sting, are often a symptom of something deeper. It's like they're casting out a line hoping you'll bite. And if you react with anger or punishment, you're just feeding into that negativity.
We take the bait, and the cycle just continues.
Exactly. And we don't want to do that. We want to stay calm, acknowledge their feelings, and then later, once things have calmed down, we can address the behavior.
So we're not letting them off the hook, but we're choosing our battles wisely. We're addressing the behavior when everyone's calm and collected and able to actually hear what the other person is saying.
Precisely. It's about teaching them that their feelings are valid, but there are more respectful and appropriate ways to express them.
I love it. This is such a different approach than how I was raised, but it makes so much sense. Okay, so we've tackled not listening. We've addressed the rude remarks. What about those behaviors that are a little more sneaky? Like, what about when kids lie?
Lying is a big one for parents. It often triggers a really strong reaction.
Yeah.
But you know what Dr. Kennedy would say? She'd probably tell us to shift our perspective on this one, too.
Okay, so if it's not about being intentionally deceitful or manipulative, what's the deeper meaning behind those little white lies?
It could be a few things. Sometimes it's about avoiding punishment. They know they did something wrong and they're afraid of getting in trouble. Other times, it's about avoiding disappointment, either from you or from themselves. They don't want to let you down.
So not always about being sneaky or conniving, but more about self-preservation.
Exactly. They're just trying to navigate a situation the best way they know how, and sometimes lying feels like the easiest way out.
Okay, that makes sense. They're not masterminds. They're just little humans trying to figure things out. But how should we handle it when we catch them in a lie? Do we grill them, demand to know the truth?
Dr. Kennedy suggests a gentler approach. Instead of confronting them in the moment when they're likely feeling defensive and ashamed, she recommends waiting and creating an opening later on.
Waiting and creating an opening. Okay, give me an example. What does that look like?
Let's say you see your child sneak a cookie before dinner, even though you specifically told them not to. Instead of saying, "Did you take a cookie? I told you not to." You could simply say, that's interesting, and then move on.
Okay, no accusations, no pressure. Just move on. Yeah.
Interesting. And what happens next? Later, when things are calmer, maybe after dinner or before bed, you can create that opening for honesty. You might say, sometimes when I make a mistake or I do something I'm not supposed to, I don't always want to tell the truth right away. It's like I need a little time to figure things out.
Yeah.
You're not directly calling them out, but you're opening a door for them to come clean.
You're normalizing those feelings of guilt and shame that often accompany lying, which can make it easier for them to be honest. I like it.
Exactly. They may not admit to the lie right then and there, but you're planting a seed, showing them that honesty is important, but so is forgiveness and understanding.
It's like you're giving them a safe space to come clean, to save face, while still getting closer to the truth. This is really resonating with me. Okay, so we've tackled these big, challenging behaviors. The not listening, the rudeness, the lying. But what about those more subtle but equally crucial aspects of their emotional development? Like, what about confidence? How do we raise confident kids in today's world?
Confidence, every parent's dream for their child, right? We want them to believe in themselves, to feel capable and worthy, but so often we go about it in the wrong way.
Oh, tell me about it. The constant praise. You're so smart. It's the best drawing I've ever seen. You're amazing. We shower them with praise, hoping it'll magically transform them into these confident little beings.
And how's that working out?
Honestly, not great.
It's because true confidence doesn't come from external validation, from us constantly telling them how great they are. It comes from within. And Dr. Kennedy suggests that one of the best ways to foster that inner confidence is to focus on the process, not just the product.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about this process over product idea.
Instead of showering your child with praise for the perfect drawing or the straight A report card, focus your attention on the effort, the creativity, the problem-solving skills they use to get there.
So instead of saying, wow, that's a beautiful drawing, you're such a good artist, it's more like, tell me about your drawing. How did you come up with this idea? What made you choose those colors?
Exactly. You're encouraging self-reflection. You're helping them see the value in their own unique way of doing things.
Which in turn builds that inner voice that says, I'm capable, I have good ideas, I can do hard things. I love it.
It's about cultivating that internal validation that doesn't crumble when they face challenges or when things don't go their way.
Okay, process over product. Definitely adding that to my parenting toolbox. What else can we do to foster true confidence in our kids?
Validate their feelings, even the messy ones, even the ones that make us uncomfortable.
Wait, so instead of trying to talk them out of their fears or their anxieties, we should just acknowledge them.
Exactly. Use phrases like, you really know how you're feeling right now. Or, it sounds like you're feeling really disappointed and sad. That's okay. It's okay to feel those feelings.
It's like we're giving them permission to be human, to experience the full spectrum of human emotions without judgment.
Exactly. And that's so important because when we try to fix their feelings or dismiss them, we're actually sending the message that those feelings aren't valid, that they shouldn't be feeling them. And that can be really damaging.
This is eye-opening. So we're focusing on the process, not just the product. We're validating their feelings, all of them. What other wisdom does Dr. Kennedy offer on this confidence-building journey?
She stresses the importance of teaching our kids to cope with imperfection. Because, let's face it, none of us are perfect, and life is messy.
Oh, tell me about it.
Yeah.
And it feels like there's so much pressure in today's world to be perfect, to get straight A's, to excel at sports, to be popular. It's exhausting.
It really is. And it can be especially damaging for those kids who are naturally more sensitive or who already have that tendency toward perfectionism.
So how do we help those little perfectionists loosen their grip and embrace the beautiful messiness of life?
Well, one of the most powerful things we can do is model it ourselves. Show them that you, as a grown-up, are not perfect. Talk about your struggles, your moments of self-doubt, the times you've messed up.
So we're normalizing imperfection, not just in words, but in our actions.
Exactly. And another powerful tool is encouraging a growth mindset, which we talked about earlier, that belief that our abilities aren't fixed, that we can learn and grow with effort.
So we're not praising them for being smart. We're praising them for trying hard, for sticking with it, even when it's tough.
Exactly. Celebrate those small victories, those aha moments that come from stepping outside of their comfort zone and trying something new, even if they don't succeed right away.
Okay, I am loving this. It feels like a whole new parenting paradigm. Connecting, understanding, supporting their inner world, giving them the tools to navigate those big feelings, to build resilience, to embrace their authentic selves.
And that's what it's all about, isn't it? Creating that safe, supportive space for our kids to explore, to make mistakes, and to grow at their own pace.
Okay, but let's be real. Parenting is messy. It's unpredictable. And even with the best intentions, there will be times when our buttons get pushed, when our own big feelings get in the way, and we react in ways that we later regret. What does Dr. Kennedy say about those inevitable missteps?
She reminds us that good parents don't get it right all the time.
Yeah.
Good parents repair.
Repair. We talked about that earlier, right? Making amends when we make mistakes.
Exactly. And she emphasizes that repair is not just for those big blow-ups. It's for those everyday moments, too. Those times when we snap at our kids, when we dismiss their feelings, when we're just not fully present because we're so caught up in our own stuff.
So even those small disconnections can benefit from repair.
Absolutely. And the beautiful thing about repair is that it not only strengthens your bond with your child, but it also teaches them such a valuable skill. The skill of making amends, of taking responsibility for their actions.
It's like we're showing them that relationships can withstand conflict, that we can mess up and still come back together stronger than before.
Exactly. It's about grace, forgiveness, and that unwavering belief that we're all doing the best we can.
I love that. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground. Behavior as a window. Two things can be true. Containment, the importance of repair, and even how to foster true confidence. But what about kids who are just different? You know, those highly sensitive, emotionally intense kids who just seem to operate on another wavelength. What advice does Dr. Kennedy offer for those parents who are raising those amazing but often challenging kids?
Well, she actually dedicates a whole chapter to those kids, the ones she calls deeply feeling kids, or DFKs, remember?
Right, the ones who feel everything so deeply and so intensely.
Exactly. And she emphasizes that these kids aren't bad or difficult, they're just wired differently. Their emotions are just bigger. They experience everything on a grander scale, and they often struggle to regulate those emotions in the same way that other kids do.
So all those well-meaning phrases, just calm down, or it's not a big deal, or stop crying, those probably aren't very effective with DFKs.
Not at all. In fact, those kinds of phrases can often make things worse because they invalidate their feelings.
So what does work? How do we help our little DFKs navigate those intense emotional waves without, losing our minds in the process?
Containment, which we talked about earlier, is key for DFKs. Sometimes it might even involve physically removing them from a situation, taking them to a calm space where they can de-escalate.
So we're not necessarily trying to rationalize with them or talk them down from the ledge. We're just being present, offering comfort, allowing them to ride out the storm.
Exactly. Because when a DFK is in the throes of a meltdown, logic and reason go right out the window. They need to feel safe and understood, first and foremost. And then, once they've calmed down, you can help them to process what happened.
That makes a lot of sense. What else can we do to support our deeply feeling kids?
Validation is crucial. Validate their feelings, even and especially when those feelings seem irrational or over the top.
So instead of trying to convince them that their fear of the dark is silly or that there's no monster under the bed, we acknowledge it.
Exactly. You might say something like, "It sounds like you're feeling really scared right now. That's okay. It's okay to be scared."
So we're letting them know that their feelings, however big or scary they might seem, are valid and acceptable.
Precisely. And that's so important for DFKs because they often feel like their big feelings are too much, that they're too much to handle. So when we validate those feelings, we're actually helping them to feel safer and more secure.
I love that. So we're meeting them where they are, accepting and supporting their unique way of experiencing the world. But what about when their big feelings lead to big behaviors? Like, what about when they're constantly battling with their siblings?
Sibling rivalry is a common challenge for all parents, but it can be especially intense when you have a DFK in the mix.
Because the reactions are just so much bigger.
Exactly. So it's even more important to remember that those jealous feelings, those territorial battles, they're all totally normal. It's developmentally appropriate.
Right. They're still learning how to navigate those complex social dynamics of how to share their space and their belongings and their parents' attention.
Exactly. And instead of trying to shut down those feelings or, referee every single interaction,
Hmm?
we can use those moments as opportunities to teach them valuable life skills.
So instead of jumping in and saying, hey, stop being mean to your sister, it's more about saying, it looks like you two are having a hard time sharing that toy right now. What are some ways you could solve this problem together?
You got it. You're teaching them conflict resolution skills, problem solving, and the importance of compromise, all while strengthening that sibling bond.
This is brilliant. I love how this approach empowers our kids to take ownership of their emotions and their behavior.
Exactly. And that's what it's all about, giving them the tools they need to navigate the world confidently and independently.
This has been incredibly helpful, but let's be real. Even with the best intentions, there will be times when we, as parents, lose our cool. We're tired, we're stressed, and we react in ways that we later regret.
What does Dr. Kennedy say about those moments?
She reminds us that parenting is hard, like really hard, And it's okay to not be perfect. What matters most is that we repair those ruptures in the relationship when they happen.
Repair, we talked about that earlier. It's so important. But how do we actually go about repairing those moments, especially when we've really lost our cool and said or done something we regret?
Well, Dr. Kennedy has this four-part framework for repair that I find really helpful. The first step is to reflect.
Reflect, like take a time out for ourselves to calm down before we address the situation. That's a great idea. But in this case, reflecting means taking some time to honestly assess our role in the situation. What triggered us? What were we feeling? What led up to that moment when we lost it?
So we're owning our part in it, not placing blame on the child.
Exactly. The second step is to acknowledge. This involves acknowledging the impact our actions had on our child.
So instead of saying, Mommy had a really bad day, so she lost her temper, it's more like, Mommy yelled at you, and that probably made you feel scared and sad. I'm really sorry for yelling.
You got it.
Yeah.
It's about stepping into their shoes, trying to see the situation from their perspective, and empathizing with how our actions made them feel.
That takes courage. It's not always easy to admit when we're wrong, especially to our kids.
You're right, it's not easy, but it's so important because when we model accountability and responsibility, we're teaching our kids to do the same. Okay, so we've reflected, we've acknowledged. What's next?
I'm guessing the next step is apologize.
You got it. A genuine apology is so powerful. And Dr. Kennedy suggests keeping it short, simple, and heartfelt. Something like, I messed up, I'm really sorry, will you forgive me?
And then I'm guessing the final step is to commit to change.
You're on a roll. Committing to change means making a sincere effort to do better next time. It doesn't mean we'll never mess up again. We're human. But it means we're committed to showing up as the best parents we can be.
I love this framework. It's simple, it's effective, and it's a great reminder that we're all works in progress.
Exactly. And that's the beauty of parenting, isn't it? We're constantly learning, growing, and evolving alongside our children. She does. And it's actually pretty brilliant in its simplicity. She suggests using the phrase, you'll know when you're ready.
Wait, really? That's it? You'll know when you're ready.
I know, right? It sounds too easy.
Hmm.
But it's so powerful because it puts the power back in the child's hands. You're saying, I trust you, I believe in you, you know your limits, and you'll figure out what feels right.
Instead of us imposing our timeline or our expectations, we're giving them the space and the freedom to figure it out for themselves.
Exactly. And you know what? Often, when we take the pressure off, they surprise us. They end up taking that leap of faith much sooner than we thought they would.
Because they're not feeling pressured or controlled. Okay, I am totally on board with this. You'll know when you're ready approach. But what about those situations where a child's hesitation is preventing them from doing something that's not necessarily fun, but important? Like starting school or going to the doctor. We can't exactly tell their teacher. They'll know when they're ready to learn their ABCs.
You're so right. There are definitely some situations where we can't just wait for our kids to feel completely ready. But even then, there are ways to approach those situations with sensitivity and understanding.
Okay, so what can we do to support our kids when they're facing those big, unavoidable, and often anxiety-provoking events in their lives?
One of the best things we can do is prepare them ahead of time. Talk to them about what to expect, read books about starting school, role-play a doctor's visit with their stuffed animals, maybe even just drive by the building a few times so it feels less unfamiliar.
It's like you're taking the mystery out of it, which in turn reduces the fear of the unknown.
Exactly. Knowledge is power. And don't underestimate the power of visuals. If they're starting school, maybe you can even arrange a quick visit to the classroom beforehand so they can meet their teacher and see where they'll be spending their days.
Those little sneak peeks can make a world of difference. Okay, so we're preparing them, but what about in the moment? When they're standing at the edge of that metaphorical diving board, feeling nervous and unsure, what do we say then?
Well, just like with everything else we've been talking about, validation is key. It's okay for them to be nervous. It's okay for them to be scared. Acknowledge those feelings, let them know you understand, and then offer reassurance and encouragement.
So it's not about dismissing their fears or telling them to just get over it. It's about walking alongside them as they navigate those big feelings.
You got it. And remember, even small gestures of support can make a world of difference. Maybe you pack a special note in their lunchbox, or give them a little hug and tell them you're proud of them for being brave.
Those little acts of love and encouragement can go a long way. This is all so incredibly insightful. I feel like we're finally starting to crack the code of childhood anxiety, you know?
I know, right? It's like we're finally starting to understand the language of our children's emotions.
Exactly. And that understanding is so powerful because it allows us to respond to them in ways that are both effective and compassionate. Okay, we've tackled shyness, hesitation, those big unavoidable events. But what about those times when a child just seems stuck? The kids who get so frustrated when they can't do something perfectly that they just give up.
You're talking about our little perfectionists, and they
Yeah.
deserve a whole episode, honestly. There's so much to unpack there.
I know, right? But for now, can you give us a little crash course on perfectionism? Like, what's going on in the brains of these kids who are so hard on themselves?
Well, Dr. Kennedy has some amazing insights into this. And one of the things she emphasizes is that these kids aren't trying to be difficult. They're often struggling with a really deep sense of inadequacy.
So it's not about being stubborn or lazy. It's about this underlying fear of not being good enough.
Exactly. They have this belief, often subconscious, that their worth is tied to their accomplishments. So if they can't do something perfectly, they feel like they're not good enough. And that's a really heavy burden for a child or anyone to carry around.
It's heartbreaking when you think about it, those little shoulders carrying so much weight. So how can we help these kids? How do we help them loosen their grip on the need for flawlessness and embrace the beauty and, let's face it, the inevitability of imperfection?
Well, one of the most powerful things we can do, and this might sound familiar, is to model it ourselves.
Show them that we as grown-ups aren't perfect, that it's okay to make mistakes.
Exactly. Let them see you mess up. Let them see that you don't have all the answers. And most importantly, let them see you being kind to yourself in those moments. Because how we talk to ourselves when we mess up, that's the blueprint our kids are getting for how to talk to themselves.
That is so true. We've got to model that self-compassion. So we're normalizing imperfection, not just in words, but in our actions too.
Precisely. And that growth mindset we talked about earlier, that's absolutely crucial for perfectionists as well.
Right. The belief that our abilities aren't fixed, that we can learn and grow with effort.
Exactly. We need to help our perfectionists shift their focus from the end goal, the perfect product, to the journey, the learning process, the progress made along the way.
Okay, so instead of praising their intelligence or their talent, we're praising their effort, their persistence, their willingness to keep trying, even when it's hard.
You've got it. It's about celebrating those small victories, those aha moments that happen when we push ourselves outside of our comfort zones and try something new, even if we don't succeed right away.
This is all making so much sense. It really feels like we're shifting from a fixing mindset to an understanding mindset, from dismissing to embracing.
Mm.
And it's amazing how much more connected I feel to my kids when I approach parenting from this place of curiosity and compassion.
I'm so glad to hear that. It's amazing how transformative it could be when we start to see those challenging behaviors as a form of communication. It's like we're finally starting to speak the same language.
And once we understand a language, we can start to have those deeper, more meaningful conversations with our kids. Okay, so we've tackled perfectionism, we've explored shyness and hesitation, we've even touched on those big, unavoidable life events that can trigger anxiety in our kids. But before we wrap up our deep dive into Dr. Becky Kennedy's Good Inside, I wanted to circle back to a topic that I think deserves a little more attention, a topic that pretty much every parent I know struggles with at some point: bedtime and sleep. You mentioned earlier that Dr. Kennedy has some interesting insights into why bedtime can feel like such a battle. What's the deal with kids and bedtime?
Oh, bedtime battles. It's like a universal parenting rite of passage, right?
Right.
No matter how well behaved your kids are during the day, something about that transition to bedtime can just flip a switch.
Tell me about it. The second I even mention the word pajamas, my little one turns into a stage 5 clinger. It's adorable and exhausting all at the same time.
Right. And Dr. Kennedy has this really interesting take on bedtime struggles. She suggests that often those meltdowns, those delays, those pleas for just one more story, they're not just about being tired or trying to stay up late. Often they stem from something much deeper, a child's fear of separation.
Separation anxiety at bedtime, that makes so much sense. They spent all day exploring the world, being stimulated, connecting with us, and now we're asking them to be alone in the dark with their own thoughts and feelings.
Exactly. And for some kids, especially those who are already more sensitive or prone to anxiety, that can feel really scary and overwhelming.
No wonder they put up a fight. So how can we help them? How can we create that sense of safety and security that allows them to actually relax and fall asleep?
Dr. Kennedy has some really great strategies for this. First, think about your bedtime routine.
Okay, so we're talking bath, book, bed, the usual suspects.
Right. But the key here is to make that routine a truly calming and connecting experience for your child.
So it's not just about rushing through the motions to get to the lights out part. It's about being present, slowing down, making those last moments of the day feel really safe and loving.
You got it. Put away your phone. Dim the lights. Maybe even diffuse some lavender essential oil. Create that ambiance of peace and tranquility. And most importantly, really focus on connecting with your child during that time. Whether it's snuggling up with a book, talking about their day, or just giving them a back rub, those little moments of connection can make a world of difference.
It's like we're setting the stage for a peaceful night's sleep, for them and for us. Because let's be honest, a calm bedtime routine benefits everyone in the house. What else can we do? What about those kids who still struggle even with a solid bedtime routine?
Well, for those kids, Dr. Kennedy suggests infusing their bedroom with reminders of your presence.
Ooh, I like this. Tell me everything. What does that look like? Do I need to build a shrine to myself in their bedroom?
Haha. No shrines necessary. Just think simple and comforting. Maybe you put a family photo on their nightstand, or you leave a little note for them to find in the morning. Even just making sure their door is slightly ajar so they can hear you moving around the house can be really reassuring.
You're subtly reinforcing that message of, even though you can't see me right now, I'm still here, you're safe and loved. I love that.
Right. It's all about creating that sense of security. And you know what? For kids who really struggle, Dr. Kennedy has this awesome tool called a comfort button.
A comfort button.
Uh-huh.
Okay, I am intrigued. Tell me more. Is this like a magical button I can push that instantly knocks my kid out? Because if so, I'll take 10.
It's not quite instant, but it's pretty cool. It's basically a little recordable button that you can put your voice on. You can sing a lullaby or just say a few calming phrases.
So it's like a personalized sound machine, but with a dose of mommy's or daddy's voice.
Exactly, and it gives them access to your voice whenever they need a little extra reassurance.
Genius. Okay, we've got the calming routine, the subtle reminders of our presence, the comfort button. What else? Are there any other sleep secrets up Dr. Kennedy's sleeve?
She also talks about the importance of helping kids develop their own self-soothing skills. Because ultimately, we want them to be able to calm themselves down without always needing us to do it for them.
Right. We're not going to be there to tuck them in and sing them lullabies forever, although some days that sounds pretty tempting.
I hear you. But seriously, teaching our kids to self-soothe is like giving them a superpower, not just for sleep, but for life in general.
I am all about superpowers. How do we do it? How do we teach these tiny humans to regulate their own emotions and find their own calm?
Well, you can start by introducing them to different calming strategies. Like, have you ever heard of deep breathing exercises?
Oh, sure. Even I use those sometimes when the overwhelm hits and I just need a minute to, like, breathe.
Exactly. And you know what? Deep breathing exercises are just as effective for kids. Something as simple as taking a deep breath in through the nose and out through the mouth can actually help regulate their nervous system and calm those racing thoughts.
It's like hitting the reset button on their little nervous systems. Okay, deep breathing. What else?
Calming mantras can be really helpful too.
Mantras like Om Shanti, Om.
You can totally go with that.
Mm.
But for kids, it's often helpful to keep it even simpler. Teach them a simple phrase to repeat when they're feeling anxious or overwhelmed, like, I am safe, or Mommy's just in the other room, or even just, I can handle this.
It's like giving them a little script to follow when their worries start to spiral.
Exactly. It helps them to reframe their thoughts and focus on something positive and reassuring. And you know what else can be surprisingly effective? Don't underestimate the power of a lovey.
Oh, those loveys are serious business. My daughter has this little stuffed elephant that she's had since she was a baby, and it goes everywhere with her. Bedtime, car rides, even to the grocery store.
That's awesome. And it makes perfect sense. Sometimes just having that familiar, comforting object to cuddle can be incredibly soothing for kids.
It's like a little piece of security they can take with them wherever they go. Okay, so we're helping them build their self-soothing toolkit. Deep breaths, calming mantras, and of course the trusty lovey. But what about those times when a child's fear is about something specific, like they're terrified of the dark or they're convinced there's a monster under the bed? How do we deal with those very real, at least to them, fears?
You know, Dr. Kennedy's approach to fear is one of the things I admire most about her. She has this really refreshing perspective on fear. She reminds us that fear in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's a normal, healthy emotion. It's our brain's way of keeping us safe from danger.
So it's not something to be ashamed of or dismissed. We don't want to tell our kids to just be brave or stop being scared.
Exactly. Because when we try to rationalize a child's fear or convince them that it's not real, it often backfires. It's like we're saying, your feelings aren't valid.
And that can be so invalidating, especially for a child. So if logic and reason don't work, what does?
Connection,
Yeah.
empathy, compassion.
So sometimes the best thing we can do is just be there with them in their fear, letting them know they're not alone.
You got it.
Yeah.
Dr. Kennedy talks about this strategy she calls jump in the hole with them.
Uh,
And it's one of my all-time favorite parenting phrases.
Jump in the hole with them. I love that. It's such a powerful image. So instead of trying to pull them out of the metaphorical hole of their fear, we're jumping in there with them.
Exactly. We're saying, I see your fear, I hear you, and I'm not going to leave you alone in this. So if your child is terrified of the dark, instead of saying, there's nothing to be afraid of, it's just a shadow, you could say something like, that sounds really scary. It's okay to be scared. I'm here with you.
You're letting them know that you see their fear, you hear their fear, and you're not going to abandon them to face it alone. Powerful stuff.
Right. It's about creating that sense of safety and security. And sometimes just knowing that we're not alone in our fear can make it feel a little less scary.
This is so powerful. It's about shifting our perspective from fixing to understanding, from dismissing to embracing.
You're getting it. And that shift, it's not always easy, but it's so worth it because it allows us to show up for our kids in a way that feels authentic and compassionate.
And isn't that what it's all about? Creating those deep, meaningful connections with our kids.
Absolutely. Because at the end of the day, that connection, that feeling of being seen, heard, and loved unconditionally, that's what matters most.
Okay, I am so on board with this. But what about those times when a child's fear is preventing them from doing something they might actually really enjoy if they could just get past that initial fear, like refusing to go to a birthday party because they're feeling shy?
That's a great question, and it's something a lot of parents struggle with. Because part of us just wants to push them out of their comfort zone and say, go have fun, you'll be fine.
Right. Because we know, deep down, they'd probably have a blast if they could just relax and enjoy themselves. But we also don't want to overwhelm them or make them feel pressure.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance, respecting their boundaries while also gently encouraging them to step outside of their comfort zone. And one of the most powerful tools we have as parents is our words.
Okay, so what kind of magic words are we talking about here? Give me the good stuff.
Dr. Kennedy suggests using the phrase, and this might sound familiar, you'll know when you're ready.
Wait a minute, didn't we just talk about this? I swear, you'll know when you're ready is starting to sound like my new parenting mantra.
And it's a good one because
Okay.
it works. It's simple, but it's brilliant because it puts the power back in the child's hands. It tells them, I trust your judgment. I believe in your ability to assess your own readiness.
Instead of us dictating when they should be ready, we're giving them the space and the freedom to figure it out for themselves. I love it. So we're not dragging them onto the dance floor or forcing them to join the game of tag, but we're also not letting them hide in the corner the whole time.
You've got it. It's about being that supportive presence, offering encouragement, but not pressure. And most importantly, conveying that unwavering belief in their ability to navigate the situation in their own way and in their own time.
This is so incredibly helpful. It's like we're giving our kids permission to have their own experience, to honor their own unique timeline. But what about those situations where a child's hesitation is preventing them from doing something that's not necessarily fun, but important, like starting school or going to the doctor? We can't exactly tell their teacher. They'll know when they're ready to learn their ABCs.
You're so right. There are definitely some situations where we can't always wait for our kids to feel completely ready. But even then, there are ways to approach those situations with sensitivity and understanding.
Okay, so what can we do? How can we support our kids when they're facing those big, unavoidable, and often anxiety-provoking events in their lives?
Preparation is key in these situations. The more we can prepare our kids for what to expect, the less scary and overwhelming those experiences will feel.
Okay, that makes sense. So how do we actually do that? What does preparation look like in practice?
Talk to your child about what to expect. Read books about starting school or going to the doctor. You can even role play those experiences with their stuffed animals.
I love the idea of role-playing. It's like a dress rehearsal for real life. It gives them a chance to practice those coping skills in a safe and fun way.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of visuals. Maybe you can even drive by the school or the doctor's office a few times beforehand, just so it feels less unfamiliar.
Those little sneak peeks can make a world of difference. So we're preparing them ahead of time, but what about in the moment? When they're standing there at the school door or in the doctor's office feeling nervous and unsure, what do we do then?
Just like with everything else we've been talking about, validation is key. It's okay for them to be nervous. It's okay for them to feel scared. Acknowledge those feelings, let them know you understand, and then offer reassurance and encouragement.
So it's not about dismissing their fears or telling them to just get over it. It's about walking alongside them as they navigate those big feelings.
You got it. And remember, sometimes even small gestures of support can make a world of difference. Maybe you pack a special note in their lunchbox, or you let them choose a sticker to wear to the doctor's appointment.
It's those little acts of love and encouragement that can really boost their confidence. Okay, this is all making so much sense. I feel like I'm armed with a whole new set of tools to help my kids navigate those tricky social and emotional situations. But I have to ask, we've covered so much ground today. Is there anything else, any final words of wisdom that you think our listeners should keep in mind as they embark on this journey of mindful parenting?
The most important thing to remember is that you are doing a great job. Parenting is hard work, probably the hardest job in the world, and you are the expert on your child. Trust your instincts, be kind to yourself, and remember that you are both good inside.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible insights with us today.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
And to all of you listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Dr. Becky Kennedy's Good Inside. We hope you found it as insightful and inspiring as we did. Remember, you are doing great and you've got this. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.